Hi, I'm Charlie Mato-Toyela with Bluebear Flutes, and of course, you may have seen our other videos here on YouTube and some of the other sites that we post them on, like on Instagram, sometimes on TikTok and what have you. Don't forget our website also, bluebearflutes.com. I always like to mention that to people. They always ask, where can I get that amplifier? Where can I get a flute like that? You know, we do have a website. We do make a lot of Native American flutes. Today's video is a little bit different. It's something around the holidays. In the past, we've made some Christmas videos, which are usually kind of comical or kind of nice. And I mean, there was one where I drove a flute hours and hours to this customer's house because she was a little disappointed that it didn't look like the postal service was going to make it on time. So we drove it to her, and it was pretty comical. But today's video is the first time I'm going to be offering this kind of video. It's about Thanksgiving. And first, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. My dad's family is Cherokee Indian, and I learned a lot from his side of the family growing up. It's really the people that I grew up with was all of my dad's nieces and nephews and my grandparents and everybody from his side. And like I said, they did a lot of really interesting things, and some of my dad's family had very specific customs that were a little different than other people's customs. And when you're looking back on it when you're older, you didn't really appreciate it as much as you did when you were young. But when you're older, you really appreciate it and know what you received from the deal, as you would say. My mom's side of the family, her father was Lakota and Ojibwe from Wisconsin. He was from La Crosse, and he was in the military for a long time. I have a newspaper clipping that says he was the first Native American in the U.S. Army to become a brigadier general. And that's kind of interesting. Coincidentally, the first Native American to become a brigadier general in the U.S. was Stan Waddy, who was a Cherokee, but he was in the Confederate Army, which is kind of neat too. Lots of neat stuff. He met my grandmother, my mom's mom, in Panama when he was down there working on the Panama Canal. I mean, we're talking way back in the day. And my mom's mom was from the San Blas Islands. She was a Kuna Indian. So lots of neat stuff. Now, I'm telling you about my family's heritage and culture here because I'd like to share some stuff with you about Thanksgiving, some of which I've learned on the go, some of which I've known for a long time, and some of which I've, I guess, come to realize in recent times. But with regards to Native American culture, a lot of people believe that once an Indian baby is born, that they know everything about their history and their culture. And of course, you know, I could ask any of you, you know, about whatever culture you might descend from, if it's aside from Native American, because I think we're the ones that get asked that question a lot. Do you know everything about your people's culture, and were you born with that information? And of course, the logical answer is no. I can just see little Grandma Whitehead sending her grandson off to school. Now, don't forget, when you're in the sweat lodge, you got to go around counterclockwise. No, it's counterclockwise. You remember, we're Blackfeet. It's not like that. You know, there's so many more important things we have to worry about in life when we're getting started, and we try to share values and ideas and things like that, along with customs, the ones that some of us may still practice. Some of the customs that we practice may be borrowed, and they may historically be borrowed. I don't know if you know this, but a lot of Cherokee stomp dance songs, which we always love stomp dancing, are in Muskogee, you know, so there's a lot of things to be learned there, a lot of stuff to unpack, as the cool kids say. But anyway, typically all Native American people were thankful historically on a daily basis and gave thanks regularly for just about everything. Historically, I am completely unaware of any Native people having a specific day of the year. We did have calendars and know all about, you know, time's passage and what have you. But historically, there weren't specific days that we had for what is known as Thanksgiving today, to my knowledge. Of course, there were a lot of different festivals during different times, and different peoples had different customs, and there's so many differences that there's a lot that you could think of. Did you have a holiday on this day? Yeah, we probably had a holiday on that day. Did you have one on this day? Yeah, I had one on that way too. But you know, we didn't specifically have like a Thanksgiving day as they tell people today. They start them off in school, telling them that there's a Thanksgiving holiday that we celebrated with the Pilgrims. Which brings me to my first experience of hearing something. That always kind of set me off just a little bit. Why would people invading our land have a holiday with us? I guess there's parts of it that make sense. But I'll never forget my first experience. I got to hear Paul Harvey. Any of you young folks, if you've never heard of Paul Harvey, he's kind of interesting to look into. The first story I'll remember him talking about was Thanksgiving, and how the native people that helped the Pilgrims get set up, actually the Pilgrims kind of went and took some of their food from them that winter because they didn't have enough of their own, and a lot of those native people went hungry and died. Eventually they killed them. And this is an important concept, especially to a young native person, to know, I guess it's a truth by another perspective. It really is. But it also brings me to something really important, because I listen to a lot of the world's going-ons, and I try to not take sides if I can. And I've noticed that there's groups of people in the world that kind of try to adopt our struggles. Like they want to take our struggles as their own. So they decided that we're having a Native American celebration day, or they decided that we're having this, that, or the other. To me, it's all kind of a redundancy. It's a return of the same thing. Whether we're having Thanksgiving for, having a bountiful harvest, as they tell you in school, or if we're having a Native American celebration day, or one of my favorite ones, when they throw tomatoes in Canada. I know that makes a lot of you Canadians mad. I'm sorry about that, but I don't throw tomatoes. But, one way or the other, it's still somebody else kind of dictating our holidays to us, and it just doesn't sit with me. There are opposing groups to the ones that want to adopt our struggles also, and those groups, certain groups that remind us regularly of their genocides and what have you. And speaking of genocide, I don't know if you know, there's 20 million plus Native American people. It's about 95% of the population of the Americas. In the U.S., it's easy to say the United States of America and think of it as a small part of the world. But I'm talking about Canada, Alaska. I consider Hawaii and all the Pacific Islands, South America, all the islands in the Gulf, and Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands. There's a lot to consider there. There's a lot of people. Back at the time, 20 million people would have been a huge, massive population of the world. Before I was preparing for this video, I made sure I got some of my numbers straight, because I want to make sure I'm not telling you guys a fib if I can help it. And I was reading, and I'm reading why the Spaniards or why the Europeans were able to win against native people. And they always talk about superior firepower and having horses that could haul, heavy artillery and whatever. And I seen a word in there, advanced civilizations, about Aztec and people in Peru and what have you. And I'm thinking, well, this is amazing. I've never seen somebody putting all those words overpowering us on one side and then calling us advanced on the other side. I usually hear those people talking about how we were savage tribes and all this crazy stuff. Things you just don't know about. Things I don't have time here to share with you. If I keep track of the time, I probably won't even tell you half of what I really feel like I should. But there's, like I say, really a lot to it. When it comes to genocide, there was a lot of people destroyed, cultures and ideas and languages that I've studied that the likes of which only scratched the surface of what we had going on. But a lot of times that other group I mentioned about want to condemn us for living in the past, and I always want to point out how much better we are with cell phones and pots and pans. One of my old Indian friends, I always remember him talking about how he was so glad he had pots and pans these days. And I'm thinking, if I had it all to do over again, I'd probably have done it a slightly different way. They're always talking about how people live longer. Native Americans, Native teens have one of the highest suicide rates of any peoples in the world. Native people have one of the shortest lifespans of people in the world. Today, when 2 generations ago, my great grandmothers on my mom's and my dad's side of the family, my dad's grandmother lived to be 104 and smoked a pipe every day since she was a teenager and grew probably her own tobacco like my mom's grandmother did, and smoked cigars every day until she died at 114. So the lifespan of a lot of Native people today, people live in different areas and have different things going on for them. It can range from in the 50s, and some of them maybe even in the 40s if we look a little further south, until maybe up into the 70s, which is typical of a lot of people today. But when you start splicing the numbers and looking at the specifics, Native people still are not doing as well. So that's that side of the game. And I'm not asking for any kind of sympathy or anything. I just want to try to help set some things straight, which is where I'm going with the rest of this. But that sympathy part, a lot of people think that, natives are, the poor native, the this, the that, or all of us have casinos, or all of us get some kind of check or something. That's no more true than much of the Thanksgiving stories I learned in elementary school. It's just not the way things are. And it's so specific. There again, I can tell you about this tribe and how their monies are dispersed. It has nothing to do with the people directly, and tell you about this tribe that everybody gets a check once a month and they're really no better off for it. And don't get me started on casinos. But anyway, I wanted to point out some of the truths, because to me the truth is so important. And many of you that are watching this may not know my idea of the truth. I have a very fluid and very huge, I don't know of a word big enough to describe my concept of the truth. I do always like to refer back to ancient truths, and I'm always thinking about this ancient Egyptian proverb of the truth is in the eye of the beholder, and a lot of you think beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I don't know when that one came about, and somebody might can post it in the comments below, but truth in the eye of the beholder is not something you might find floating around in your modern history books today about ancient Egyptians, but it's in there. I had to learn it from someplace. Truth is a universal concept. What I think the truth is and what you think the truth is may be two different things. Everything I told you may have been a lie to you, and you may have a different truth for it. And vice versa. I might think it's all the truth, and I think that you're lying. It's like that. But some things I would like to share with you. Thanksgiving is in the United States here always on Thursday. There are 7 days in our week. That's kind of a universal concept there at the moment. Of those 7 days, 6 of them are named after Norse deities. One of them, Saturday, the ruling class of people, and I won't get started there because I want to keep making videos, and I don't mean a race of people. Don't get that confused. Ruling groups of people, I should say, really like Saturday a lot, and they like it because of which one of their gods it's named after, and that's okay. I really don't have any problem with them doing their own thing as long as they don't hurt certain people. I'm okay. But Monday, the god of the moon. Tuesday, Tyr, the god of the hunt. Wednesday, an old High German I learned in my German class. I speak a couple of languages. Wodenstag was Wednesday, and it's said differently in Norman and then Old English and even in Low German. But Wodenstag is how I learned how to say it. Odin's Day. Thursday, then there's Friggstag or Freya, whichever one you want to call it. Saturday used to be Loki's day. Sunday was Zon. And, all these words have meaning, and they're so important. Thursday, Thor was a kind of a neat guy. If you haven't watched any of the Marvel movies, that might get you interested, but they're not like ancient Norse mythology, which is one of the first things I learned in my youth was about ancient Norse people. I knew a lot about my own people, studied a lot about my own people, and learned from cousins and family and uncles and aunts and grandparents and all kinds of stuff. But learning other cultures was interesting to me. And Thursday is a great day. It's a day of the feast. My family, actually, we have feasts because of Thor's day, often because of remembering that kind of thing. Thor was kind of a good guy. He was about families, and marriage was important to Thor. Men's place in society was really important to Thor. There's a lot of really good stuff I got out of that. So, it kind of stuck with me. Thor's festival is held in January, typically, in Iceland and a couple of other Scandinavian countries and what have you. Thor's festival is kind of an interesting day. A lot of you might think it looks like Saturday, but it's not. Just really, really interesting stuff. The 27th of November, getting back on point here, is in some countries Wayland Smith's Day, which is of the Poetic Eddas. So he is a Nordic or Asgardian or Norse referenced person. Wayland Smith, kind of an important guy in that particular area. Although the stories of him I've read have been very confusing. Wayland Smith escaped a Sami king by fashioning a flying suit. I mean, there's some food for thought, I mean, how many times have we got to hear about that in culture? A couple times, but every time we do, I always put a lot of consideration to it, because that's interesting. I mean, did somebody actually build a flying suit back in those days? That's kind of cool. We have native stories like that too, but they don't go around November the 27th. So I won't. And today's, of course, the 24th. A lot of times Thanksgiving's on the 25th. But anyway, so he actually, in some stories, killed some of the Sami king's sons and built this flying suit and took off, which is very interesting. It's interesting, and this is kind of summing up the end of my story here. It's interesting because the Sami people, which I actually have in my DNA, if you ever do your ancestry DNA, a lot of us have those people, but the Sami people are kind of in my opinion, like an oppressed people today. No offense against my Danish friends and family. Y'all are great, but there's a lot of oppression going on there. I just couldn't. If you want to look into it, look into it. SAMMI, Sami people, interesting folks. But it's kind of interesting that there was ever a Sami king and that he was ever keeping Wayland Smith. But that's what happens. Cultures take over other cultures, and they do this, that, and the other. And I'm not telling you I'm assimilated at all. I'm not telling you that. There's like a spirit of me that just doesn't assimilate to anything. I mean, it's kind of like let God take the wheel type thing. But, every peoples do this kind of thing. So it's not necessary to hate anybody. It's really not. I mean, that's not being thankful, even if you were trying to perpetrate the custom and idea of Thanksgiving. And another good point, too, going back to the powers that be, I always like to say, which I don't know how many of these videos I should ever make talking about the powers that be. I remember this one great president, but it usually happens near the feast of Uller and Skadi, which that's like a feast opening the hunt time, where in Norse customs you would like start hunting, which kind of goes along with Thanksgiving, and then down the road you have Thor's Day in January, and when you're doing that, it's like for a purpose, hunting, you have a feast, and then you have a feast on Thor's Day. So all this stuff is really interesting. The reason I share it with you is, knowledge is power, they say. And that's what they used to tell us when I was a kid on the after-school specials on TV. You really should look into any of them. Study them. Learn them about your own people. Customs are so important. I definitely don't want anybody getting rid of statues and monuments that anger me, because why would I want to forget these kind of things ever happened? What should happen is more of us should make monuments and statues and spend time communicating these ideas with people. That's the thing that I think really is important. And, in addition to offering tobacco that I raise or offering the sound of the flute, that's how I like to give thanks. So anyway, I hope you guys have all found some use in this video. And if you did, you may check out some of my other videos where I'm talking a little less, or at least not about Thanksgiving. And hope to hear and see you again very soon. Y'all take care. Thank you.